Let's jump right into this explainer and see if we can piece together the absolute puzzle of the hantavirus outbreak on the MV Hondius. We're going to trace its origins, look at exactly how it attacks the human body, and ultimately figure out what this whole situation means for global health.
So, we have to start with the inciting incident. What exactly happened on the MV Hondius? Just picture this for a second. You're embarking on this incredible luxury voyage, totally surrounded by the breathtaking, icy landscapes of the Southern Hemisphere. And then, out of nowhere, the trip is just entirely derailed by a rare, invisible, and deadly microscopic threat. A sudden fatal outbreak happens. Passengers are anxious, they're locked down in their cabins, and public health experts around the world are basically scrambling for immediate answers. When a severe illness strikes a closed environment, like a tightly packed cruise ship, the stakes are just incredibly high. I mean, we all remember those early days of the recent pandemic, right? But to really grasp how this ship became ground zero for such a rare pathogen, we actually have to look back at the days before the passengers even walked up the gangway.
And that brings us to the timeline, which is absolutely crucial here. Our story actually kicks off a few weeks before April, with a Dutch couple traveling through rural South America. Keep that in mind because it's a huge detail. Then, right at the beginning of April, this couple, along with all the other passengers, boards the MV Hondius all the way down at the southern tip of Argentina. Just days later, a fatal outbreak emerges, tragically claiming the lives of those first two fatalities, the Dutch couple. Basically, an invisible threat most likely hitched a ride from a completely rural terrestrial setting straight into the densely packed, super isolated environment of a cruise ship.
All right, let's move on to Section 1, Unmasking the Hantavirus, Profiling the Invisible Threat.
Now, you might be wondering where this even came from. What's really interesting is that hantavirus isn't some brand new, completely unknown mystery. It actually has a deeply rooted history. The virus gets its name from the Hantan River over in South Korea, which is exactly where it was early identified. So while it feels totally shocking to see it suddenly pop up on a modern cruise ship in South America, medical professionals have actually been tracking its footprint across the globe for quite some time now.
But here's where the plot really thickens. According to the World Health Organization, the word hantavirus doesn't just refer to one single infection. Actually, scratch that, it's more like a giant, complex family tree. There are roughly 20 different viral species within this family that have been identified so far. It is a highly complex group of viruses. It's relatively rare, sure, but when it does strike, it is a seriously dangerous threat.
Which leads us to Section 2, How the Virus Spreads, Analyzing the MO.
So what is its MO? How does it actually jump to us? Well, hantavirus is intrinsically linked to rodents. Specifically, we're talking about rats and mice. It works like a chain reaction. Step 1. These rodents leave droppings or urine in rural settings, places like forests, fields, or barns. Step 2. Over time, that waste just dries out. And step 3, this dried waste gets disturbed. It turns into contaminated dust that gets blown up into the air and then inhaled by humans. So it's actually slightly airborne in that specific way. Just imagine someone simply sweeping out an old, infested farm building. That completely everyday action can stir up this invisible dust and unexpectedly turn deadly. And honestly, this perfectly explains why human cases are typically reported in exactly the kind of rural environments where that Dutch couple was traveling.
But wait, there is a massive twist in our mystery here. It's called the Andes virus exception. While most hantaviruses only ever spread from rodent to human, the Andes strain, which importantly is found in Argentina and Chile, is actually capable of rare human-to-human transmission. To put that into perspective, back in late 2018, an entire Argentinian outbreak was traced back to just a single party. Literally one person with the virus led to 34 confirmed cases and 11 deaths. This is a terrifying but major clue as to how our Dutch couple might have triggered the wider outbreak once they were inside the confined shared spaces of the MV Hondius.
Let's look at Section 3, Symptoms and Survival Rates, the human impact.
When the virus does get into the body, it generally manifests as one of two severe escalating illnesses. On one hand, you have pulmonary syndrome. This acts a lot like a Trojan horse. It starts off with what feels like totally normal flu-like symptoms. You get some fatigue, a fever, maybe some muscle aches, and then come the headaches, chills, and an upset stomach. But then, bam, it rapidly escalates into severe respiratory symptoms and extreme breathlessness. On the other hand, hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome is even more intense. This version primarily attacks the kidneys, leading to some truly terrifying later-stage symptoms, things like low blood pressure, internal bleeding, and eventually acute kidney failure.
And the human toll for these conditions? It is absolutely staggering.
For the pulmonary syndrome, the CDC notes a startling mortality rate of 38%. Just think about that. More than a third of the people who contract this respiratory type of the virus will not survive. It highlights absolutely perfectly why early detection is so critical here.
And the stakes are even higher for hemorrhagic fever, which carries a grim 50% mortality rate. Half of the people who get this kidney-attacking version are likely to lose their lives. And while, yes, older or frailer individuals or people with underlying health conditions definitely face devastating consequences, make no mistake, this infection is intensely serious regardless of whether a patient is old, young, or totally healthy.
Okay, Section 4. Testing and supportive care. The counterattack.
So how do doctors even confirm a case when the symptoms start off looking like a regular flu? The gold standard here is the PCR test. We all remember these from the COVID pandemic, right? That simple little swab inside your cheek or nose. Well, that minute sample goes into a lab where they use a molecular biology technique to amplify and copy specific DNA segments. It literally creates billions of copies from a tiny sample. It's essentially putting a massive magnifying glass over the virus's biological fingerprint so doctors can clearly see exactly what they're up against.
But once they see it, how do they fight it? Well, there actually is no specific treatment or magic vaccine. Instead, medical teams have to rely entirely on supportive care. Their job is just to keep the patient's body fighting. This means using oxygen therapy and mechanical ventilation to fight that severe breathlessness, maybe some antiviral treatments, and in the absolute worst cases of hemorrhagic fever, using dialysis to take over for failing kidneys. It is a total, all-hands-on-deck effort to just support the body's natural defenses until it clears the virus.
Let's wrap up with Section 5, the final verdict, global risk assessment.
Now, if you are feeling a little anxious after hearing about the severity of those symptoms, go ahead and take a breath. The World Health Organization has explicitly stated the risk to the global population is low. While it was undeniably a deeply serious and terrifying situation for the folks quarantined on board the MV Hondius, and you can bet public health experts will aggressively monitor it, we are a very long way from a lockdown. This is not coronavirus 2.0. The transmission mechanics of this virus, which mostly rely on direct contact with rodent environments, naturally limit its ability to just sweep across the globe like a highly contagious respiratory pandemic.
However, we can't ignore the bigger picture here. This whole explainer leaves us with a pretty chilling final thought. Sure, a lockdown isn't looming today, but what other rare, invisible threats are just quietly hitching a ride on our global travels right now? That Dutch couple simply went on a beautiful adventure through rural South America and inadvertently ended up bringing a deadly microscopic mystery aboard a luxury ship. As we keep pushing boundaries and exploring the most remote corners of the globe, what other dormant pathogens are just waiting in the dust, ready to board? It's a truly fascinating,